Christmas is not as joyful as we think. Well, at least you'll be thinking that after hearing these stories. Number 10, Mysterious Man. Reddit user by the name of Scyther talks about a personal horror story that involved her and her family. It was Christmas night when the user and her family were driving home from a fancy restaurant. They decided to stop at a gas station as the dad needed some cigarettes and the mom and her sister went to the bathroom, meaning that the user was all alone inside of the car. After about 10 minutes, she began to wonder why her family hadn't come back yet, but as she looked up, she noticed a man standing outside staring right at her. Eventually, the family came back and this is when the man started to approach the car, but luckily they managed to drive off. Later that night, when the girl was at home watching YouTube, she heard a loud thumping noise coming from the window behind her. At first, she thought it was a bird, but as she peeped out, she saw the man from the gas station, standing in the family's driveway, staring up at her room. When their eyes met, she recalled that he was just standing there, grinning. This is when the user screamed, which prompted the dad to wake up, grab a baseball bat, and call the cops. When the cops arrived, the man was arrested, and later it was discovered that their back door handle was damaged, which could have been an attempt by this man to enter their home. At our number 9 spot, we have a different type of party. Reddit user by the name of IIA recalled the story when they're at a Christmas party in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The party was in full swing when the electricity suddenly cut out. However, the guests are undeterred. They continue to enjoy themselves by the light of lanterns and candles. Confusion soon set in as they realized that their electronic devices weren't working as well. Suddenly, all the doors and windows in the house shut, trapping all the guests inside. And this is when everything begins to get really strange. The user then said that 6 of the guests began to float in the air, much to the shock and amazement of all the other people. These floating guests' clothing and hair burned away as well, leaving them with horrific burns. One of the floating guest was choking, and another guest was a doctor who was rushing to help them. However, the moment he touches the choking man, he is also disfigured. The floating guest's eyes glow with a strange otherworldly lights, and the partygoers are unable to move or speak. As the situation becomes more and more terrifying, a baby unlike any other appeared, which ended up consuming their own mother. This infant creature had bright red eyes and moved at unimaginable speeds. This is when the user hid and waited for police to come, who took him in for questioning and accused the user of murder and cannibalism after seeing the scene. The user ended saying that whatever he saw that night was something he could never comprehend ever again. Number 8, the first Christmas. When Reddit user CMD102 and their family moved into the Teller house, they had no idea about the tragic history of Victoria Teller, who is a woman who had given birth to a baby boy whose father was unknown. According to the legend, the baby passed away just a few months later, and Victoria took her own life a year after that. Rumors circulated about the circumstances of the baby's death and Victoria taking her own life. Some have speculated that Victoria, in her grief-stricken psychosis, began buying dolls to replace her dearly departed son. The doll would then suffer the same fate as the real baby in her mind, and she would bury it and move on to another. People, mostly teenagers, made a Halloween tradition to search for the doll's graveyards. They searched the backyard and the woods behind this place, but nothing was found in these 6 years that the house was empty. Despite these rumors, the user's family had a peaceful few months in the house until strange occurrences started happening again. These included wrapping paper being shredded and strange noises coming from inside of the walls. These events intensified on Christmas Eve when the family discovered that their tree and presents had been completely destroyed. As they're cleaning up, the user's wife found a doll buried in the yard, leading them to believe that Victoria's ghost was the one actually haunting their home. Number 7, never visiting grandma ever again. This Reddit user had a loving grandma like many of us have. Every time he came over, she would make loads of food and spoil him until there wasn't enough love in the world to give anymore. However, as time went by, fewer and fewer people would show up for Christmas dinner at their grandmother's house. So on Christmas Eve, this user decided to take a visit, and he is greeted with all the love in the world with a buffet right in front of him. The only difference this year was that the grandma told him not to leave their rooms at night, and she gave him a list of things to do before bed in order to get good gifts from Santa. Odd, but he didn't care. The list went from things like make sure you close your windows and not putting wood in the fireplace after 9. Usual, right? But then it slowly transitioned to things like you may hear growling from the kitchen, and as someone walks in your room at night, act like you're asleep. These requests started to scare the grandson, and by that time, a scratching noise could be heard outside of his room. Ever seen the movie The Visit? Well, this is basically that. Number 6, the Mistletoe Bride. The Legend of the Mistletoe Bride is a tale of love, determination, and the power of perseverance. On Christmas Eve, a young woman is confronted by the mistletoe bow, who are these mischievous spirits who offer her a sprig of mistletoe. If she can make it through the forest without being touched by the mistletoe, she will be rewarded with eternal happiness and the love of her true husband. But if she is touched, she will be cursed to a life of solitude and misery. The young woman sets out into the forest and manages to dodge the mistletoe, but is eventually caught by the spirits. She fails and must return to the village alone. Years pass and she becomes known as the Mistletoe Bride, which is a cursed figure. But on one Christmas Eve, the spirits offer her a second chance. She grabs another sprig of mistletoe and she sets out into the forest again. This time she succeeds and is rewarded with the love of her true husband. The legend reminds us to never give up on our dreams and to always keep fighting for what we want, because this girl would have just been disfigured if she didn't do this. In the hump of our list, we have a spy cam. 6 years ago on Christmas Day, Reddit user by the name of MananList stumbled upon a unique ornament with a built-in camera in a clearance box at a store. He immediately realized it could be used to capture a unique perspective of their holiday celebrations and grabbed the last one from the shelf. The user forgot about the ornament until he and his wife began to decorate the house for Christmas earlier in the month. He excitedly showed it to his wife, and they came up with the idea to secretly use it to catch Santa in the act on Christmas night. So the user decided to dress up in an old Santa costume he had in the attic. In the nights leading up to Christmas, the user would turn on the camera to make sure it was working properly. Then on Christmas Day, he played Santa in front of the camera and left gifts by the fireplace. The Reddit user's daughters were ecstatic to watch the video and see their dad as Santa. However, they also pointed out a strange man in an elf costume in the background of the video. The user was very confused and couldn't explain the presence of this man, neither could the daughters. Number 4, Christmasland. One Reddit user by the name of Elias Withrow was only 6 years old. They experienced something so terrible that has left them haunted ever since. Basically, this user would talk about how they never received the warmth of their parents since their dad was very absent from their life, and as a result, the mom had to work 2 jobs. So Christmas was really never a joyful time for them. However, as Christmas was approaching, this Reddit user found themselves becoming increasingly desperate to experience the magic of the season. You know, the Christmas joy? They were determined to find a way to make their Christmas dreams a reality, even if it meant to take drastic measures. And so they made a fateful decision that would change their life forever. They decided to go to Christmasland. What is it? Christmasland was filled with excitement and wonder. They marveled at the beautiful snow-covered landscape and felt a sense of joy and wondered what they had experienced before. But as they explored this magical land, they began to realize there was a dark side to its beauty. They encountered strange and dangerous creatures and were forced to confront the demons of their past in order to survive. Sounds like a Christmas story. In the end, the user discovered that the true meaning of Christmas was not found in material possessions or festive traditions, but in the strength and resilience of the human spirit. Number 3, the snowman ritual. The snowman ritual is an ancient tradition that originated in Scythia in the 4th century. This ritual, which is performed during the winter months, is designed to bring favor and protection throughout the coming year. The ritual takes 3 days to complete and is traditionally performed between Christmas Eve and New Year's Day. However, it can be performed during any cold period with any sufficient snowfall. It is the most effective for farmers and homeowners with livestock and pets, but can be attempted by urban dwellers as well. To perform the ritual, you will need a snowman at least as tall as the person performing the ritual. Tree branches or wooden sticks, string or rubber plants, plant material, vegetable oil, animal material, and animal blood. Yeah. That's where this kind of gets satanic. This ritual involves building a snowman and performing specific incantations and actions on each of the 3 days. If the snowman is in the same spot after the 3 days, you are safe for a year. But if his location moves, you gotta pack your bags and move because he's after you. It is important to read the entire sets of instructions, because if you don't, expect Frosty the Snowman, but a horror version. Number 2, the Christmas feast. A Reddit user by the name of Mike Rants tells a haunting story about one particular Christmas feast. Story begins with an old man walking to the Cardinal family's home on Christmas Eve. The Cardinal family was known for their dedication to helping those in need, and he had only recently moved into the neighborhood, so the old man took this as a gesture of kindness and just couldn't refuse their hospitality, even though deep down he knew something could have been off. As he entered the house, he was greeted by the friendly smiles of Ben and Lucy Cardinal and their 2 children, Timmy and Camilla. As the evening continued, the old man grew more and more uneasy. It wasn't until he saw the gleam in Timmy's eyes and the cold glint in Camilla's smile that he realized the terrible truth. The Cardinals family had a dark tradition. Each Christmas, they would invite an unsuspecting guest into their home, welcome them with open arms, and then brutally murder them and eat them for dinner. And this year, the old man was their chosen victim. As the family closed in on him, he knew that this would be his last Christmas. Boom, Christmas cannibalism. Number 1, under the Christmas tree. Reddit user Wendingus told a story about the time when the trees in his farm, along with his livestock, would die around Christmas time. The user owns this Christmas tree farm, and for years everything had been going fine. But around the festive seasons, the Christmas trees in his farm would be dying, and they would be left with a strange, tacky, dark substance. Another odd thing was that when they picked up the branches of the dying trees, they were hot to the touch. Apparently someone had tried to touch it and it had melted their finger to the bone. Then around the same time, one of the neighbor's chickens had also been killed and mutilated, leading the man to suspect that something is wrong within the forest. He and his neighbor decided to investigate and found a series of tunnels beneath the forest, and it appeared to be the source of the problem. They began to investigate inside of these tunnels like any other horror movie, and what they found was a creature that had the appearance of dozens of limbs just mashed together. Here the man found their lair filled with all sort of humans and other animals he had taken victim. At number 10 spot, we have evil carolers. We all know the tradition when a group of people come to someone's door and sing carols for a couple of minutes. Many of these carols are sung to tell the story of the birth of Christ, while others are done to spread the joy throughout the holidays. Regardless, this tradition is seen as something completely innocent and friendly nowadays. But back in the 1700s, carolers had a much darker intention for their singing. Author and historian Thomas Christensen would note that carolers in the 18th century would come to homes and demand the family for their possessions, and in some cases, they would straight up kick the door down and steal it themselves. One of the carols that were sung during the process of a home invasion went like, quote, "We have to come to claim our right, and if you don't open your door, we'll lay you flat upon the floor." The same historian recalled that in the early 1700s, one minister would describe the act of caroling as occurring in the quote, midst of rioting, chambering, which is fornication, and wantonness. At a number 9 spot, we have chimney jumping. In order for Santa to send gifts to all the nice people of the world, he must first climb down through their chimney. At least that's what the tradition states. Here, Santa will keep his reindeers on the roof while he pops down the chimney to deliver his gifts and to eat your cookies. Seems pretty innocent, right? Well, if we replace Santa with anyone else, this would be a completely different story. And unfortunately, Santa's actions is tied with many other supernatural legends and other horrific stories about chimneys. For example, Scottish and English legends speak of a friendly household spirit that enters home at night through the home's chimney. They are known as brownies or a broonie. In a much darker context, in the Middle Ages, witches were also believed to get into homes through the chimney. As well as in Greece, they believed goblins would slip down chimneys to reward good children and punish naughty ones. From all of this, it's hard to believe that Santa wasn't inspired by all these legends. At a number 8 spot, we have Don't Eat Santa's Cookies. Deeply rooted in South African culture is a terrifying story of the consequences of eating one of Santa's infamous cookies. We all know the tradition of Santa coming down the chimney to come eat all your cookies. But here in South Africa, there are fatal consequences if you decide to eat the cookie yourself. The story goes that a young boy named Danny was with his grandmother when she finished baking some Christmas cookies. She immediately warned Danny that he shouldn't touch or go near the cookies because they were meant for Santa. But kids being kids, he couldn't resist his own sugar cravings. So he thought it wouldn't hurt to eat a few, thinking no one would notice. However, the moment he went in for the bites, the grandmother noticed and got extremely upset. In a rage, the grandmother pummeled Danny and started beating him to a pulp until he actually passed away. Ever since, his tragedy has served a reminder not to mess with Santa cookies. Many have also laid claim that Grandma could have been possessed by Krampus himself, which would have explained why Grandma went full rage mode on her own grandson. Number 7, mistletoe's origin. Mistletoes have been an iconic symbol of love during the Christmas time, and tradition says that if a woman were to stand under one, they have no choice but to share a kiss with a lucky man. After each kiss, one berry of the mistletoe would be removed until it has no more left. And the reason for this tradition in the first place was to increase a woman's chance in marriage. However, from past legends and stories, the mistletoe has been used for many different sinister intentions. For example, in Greek mythology, Baal Baldur, the son of Odin, was prophesied to die. So to stop his fate, Baldur's mom and the goddess of love Frigg went on a mission to speak to all living things in order to secure an oath of security for Baldur. They spoke to almost all living things, but somehow they missed out on the mistletoe. So Loki, the god of mischief, decided to make a mistletoe arrow and put an end to Baldur. As well, the mistletoe's original tradition included that if a woman refused a kiss under the mistletoe, she would be met with bad luck, which just seems like a complete violation to consent norms nowadays. At a number 6 spot, we have the Yule lads. In Iceland, children were told terrifying stories of these mythical creatures known as the Yule lads. According to the legend told by many generations, the Yule lads would visit children at night in 13 days leading up to Christmas, and they didn't visit for any good reason. Every time they did visit, they would do some mischievous thing, and this would cause problems because there was 13 different Yule lads terrorizing people. Each of these 13 Yule lads had varying personalities, and when they visited a person, they would often steal food and resources that were essential to their own survival. And if that wasn't terrifying enough, the Yule lads also had a demonic pet cat, which had a specific taste for children, but would go after full-grown adults if needed. Many believe these creatures were from another dimension, while another large following believed it to be the children of Eve that she hid from God. Regardless, these guys are the signs of bad times, and children in Iceland must be terrified around Christmas time. In the hump of our list, we have the gingerbread. Every Christmas, there's a strong chance you will encounter gingerbread, or at least the scent of it wafting around the cold air. During these festive times, gingerbread is used to make gingerbread men and gingerbread houses that come in all shapes and sizes. However, the tradition of using gingerbread originates from the famous Brothers Grimm's tale of Hansel and Gretel. If you didn't know, in the story, the siblings get lost in the woods, and as they're searching for their way out, they stumble upon a house made of candy, cookies, and all sorts of sweets. But inside is a sinister cannibalistic witch. The witch eventually lures the two children into the home by tempting them with candy such as gingerbread, and here she eventually gets a hold of them and proceeds to cook them to eat later. Ever since this story, the tradition of making decorated gingerbread houses started to pop up in Germany during the 1800s. Considering this really dark story, it's a really good thing gingerbread symbolizes the holidays and good times rather than its previous cannibalistic history. At a number 4 spot, we have the Killer Santa. You know the Santas we see at the mall? Well, what if I told you that one of these Santas were actually a serial killer, meaning that the kids would be around this guy and even sitting on his lap. The Santa in question is a Canadian man named Bruce MacArthur. He was born on October 8th, 1951 in Lindsay, Ontario. He was seen as normal to many, even being noted as having a smile on his face at all times. Even in 1978, he got married, but as the years went by, Bruce started to show different types of behavior. He would eventually start having affairs with men, which eventually led to his divorce in 1998. When he was living alone, he would work as Santa Claus at Toronto's Agin Mall, but on the side, he would begin to let his fetishes go and go on constant dates with other men in the area. It didn't take long until these fetishes turned into atrocities, when between September 2010 to June 2017, he went along and murdered 8 men, a part of the gay community. After the bodies of his victims were found, he eventually pleaded guilty to all men and is now serving life behind bars. Number 3, Christmas stockings. During the holidays, most families will have stockings in front of their fireplaces, and this is the opportunity for our friends and family to fill it up with gifts. However, this tradition has an origin story many people wouldn't expect, including myself. According to the legend, during the 4th century, there used to be a poor man who would constantly complain about the fact that he couldn't afford a dowry for his 3 daughters, which just meant that no one would want to marry them. And at the time, when you didn't have a husband or money, many women would become intimate workers, and this is what happened to these 3, unfortunately. The incident caught the attention of Saint Nicholas himself, who is the inspiration for Santa to many. He would arrive and see 3 pairs of stockings hanging to dry in front of the hearth. So in the middle of the night, he left pieces of gold in each of the stockings, and when the girls woke up, they were so surprised, and ever since, it led to the custom of leaving stockings near a fireplace. Number 2, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was created by a department store. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer may not be as magical as you previously thought. Around Christmas time in the 1930s, the now closed Chicago department store Montgomery Ward used to give away free books to kids. But rather than purchasing books from publishers, they made their own in 1939 in an effort to save some money. Robert L. May, the store's advertising manager, was given the assignment and finally created the first draft of the Rudolph narrative. He was inspired by his own life, which included being a weak, constantly bullied youngster and an unfulfilled adult who never felt like he was living up to his potential. Soon after, his wife would pass away from cancer, and due to the expensive hospital bills, it caused him to sell all the rights to Rudolph, which eventually gave its way to the mainstream media. At a number 1 spot, we have Krampus. The Krampus story has a very long history. It first appeared as a 12th century German Christmas custom, and children in Germany would start to hear rumors in early December about a dark-haired monster with horns and fangs that carried a bundle of birch sticks used to whack mischievous kids. This Krampus would invade the towns, lashing his chains and bells, and according to traditional Alpine legend, to gather the evil kids in a basket and drag them down to the underworld. The night before December 6th, which is St. Nicholas Day, it was known as Krampusnacht, and it was a time that the good German children would get gifts in their boots.
Number 10. Nacht Ruprecht. Nacht Ruprecht was of German heritage and first appeared in folklore in the 17th century. Nacht Ruprecht, who is regarded as St. Nicholas's partner, is the antithesis of the cheerful giver of gifts. Rather, parents use Nacht Ruprecht as a frightening force to coerce their boys into obeying. It is alleged that Nacht Ruprecht will thrash or abduct youngins if they misbehave. Number 9. Hans Trapp. The story of Hans Trapp, who is of German and French origin, is a little more bizarre than most of these darker tales. Though wealthy, Trapp was viewed as a Scrooge-like character due to his unpleasant nature. He soon gave his soul to the devil and spent the rest of his days in the woods. His evil behavior began to target people, and he is reported to have dressed up as a scarecrow and abducted a young person in the woods with the intention of eating him. At that moment, God intervened and determined that Trapp needed to relax. In classic God manner, how did he settle the dispute? He clearly used a lightning strike to stop Trapp's bad deed. It is now stated that he is working with St. Nicholas in an attempt to atone for his sin. And while wearing his scarecrow costume, he terrifies or coaxes youngins into changing their mischievous behavior. Number 8. Grilla. Starting with Norse mythology from the 13th century, Icelandic folklore presents Grilla as a giantess. Grilla is portrayed as a monstrous beggar-looking huge woman who used to wander the streets, but she begged for people rather than money. It is reported that she would beg parents to give up their misbehaving youngins, so she could bring them back to her house for dinner. The story took place on a Christmas day in the 17th century. These days, Grilla can keep an eye on youngsters all year round to make sure they behave properly. Should they fail to do so, it's believed that on Christmas Eve, rather than receiving presents, her hideous body will whisk them away off to be consumed. Number 7. The Yule Lads. It turns out that Grilla wasn't all that lonely, and judging by the Yule Lads, she wasn't very hungry for her own people either. The Yule Lads are 13 entities with unique names and personalities. It's reported that these boys are notorious for wreaking havoc on disobedient people over the 13 days running up to Christmas. It's stated that if a person places their shoes on their windowsill, they will quickly find out whether the lads think they're good or naughty. While wicked youngins receive potatoes, good youngins receive goodies in their shoes. To be honest though, I wouldn't mind having a potato. You can make fries out of it. Number 6. The Yule Cat. Hey, remember to get your friends and family some new outfits. I'm just giving you a heads up, because the Yule Cat is coming for them if you don't. The story of the Yule Cat who attacks those who don't get clothes for Christmas is another thing from Iceland. This, in my opinion, is how parents can instill in their youngins the value of being thankful when they receive gifts and clothings for Christmas. Number 5. Belsnickel. Belsnickel, who's most recognized for his portrayal by Dwight from The Office, is a gritty, filthy reflection of the big guy himself. Originating in the southwest of Germany, a country that appears to enjoy its quirky Christmas customs, Belsnickel is renowned for bestowing gifts upon virtuous individuals. It is stated that his unkempt and disheveled persona will bestow upon the virtuous almonds, fruits, and tiny pastries resembling cakes concealed within his tattered clothes. However, misbehaving people would get lashed and punished. Number 4. Frau Perchta. Frau Perchta, who is of German, Austrian, and Swiss ancestry, is seen as an elderly hag with a witch's visage and a hunchback. However, in contrast to many other folk tales, this one focuses mostly on the housewives of the family. Clearly, in the past, this was a holiday for women. On the eve of the Epiphany, or January 6th, it is reported that Frau Perchta comes out to inspect homes. If she thinks the house is not clean or well maintained, she will disembowel the head of the household, usually the woman who is in charge of the mess. Number 3. Père Fouettard. Father Whipper is what Père Fouettard is literally translated to from French. You can therefore probably already predict where this may go based on that information. Present giving on December 6th sees Père Fouettard accompanying St. Nicholas in some regions of France, Belgium, and Switzerland. It's only that Père Fouettard doesn't present gifts to deserving boys and girls. Rather, he finds himself carrying out St. Nick's nefarious tasks. Père Fouettard is believed to beat and scatter coal to all the mischievous boys and girls. Number 2. The Tomten. Scandinavian tradition describes the Tomten, also called the Nisse, as a little gnome with a long white beard. It is stated that the Nisse folk visit and inspect homes, farms, and dwellings in the winter, around Christmas. It's stated that every house has one, and farms are usually the major topic of conversation. The Tomten will defend the cattle if the farm is well maintained, or if it is treated nicely, even though it is invisible. The Tomtens lose their temper quickly if they are insulted, if the farm is taken over by a lazy farmer. A Tomten that is enraged may strike someone in the ear or even cause the farm's animals to go missing or die. In other words, be considerate of the Nisse. Number 1. Krampus. Krampus, perhaps the most well-known enemy of the Christmas season, has his roots in folklore from Central Europe. Krampus, who is thought to be a cross between a goat and a demon, is characterized as having 2 horns atop his head, long pointed teeth, and hooves for feet. He is renowned for using terror and suffering to teach misbehaving people a lesson, just like many of the other legends mentioned above. Thanks to the 2015 film that portrayed the demon, Americans are now more familiar with this folklore.
At a number 10 spot, we have the Tangiway disaster. The Tangiway disaster was a tragic event that occurred in New Zealand on December 24, 1953. The disaster happened when the Wellington-Auckland Express train, known as the Limited, was crossing the Tangiway Bridge over the Wanganui River. The bridge had been weakened by heavy rainfall and was in a precarious state. Despite warnings from local residents, the train was still allowed to cross the bridge. But tragically, as the train was crossing the bridge, it collapsed. This caused several rail cars to go plunging into the river below, and eventually the accident was so devastating, with 151 people losing their lives and many more being injured. The tragedy was made even worse by the fact that it occurred on Christmas Eve, a time when many families were probably traveling to their loved ones for the holidays. The Tangiway disaster remains one of the worst rail disasters in New Zealand's history and is a reminder of the need for vigilance and caution when it comes to safety on our railways. At a number 9 spot, we have the white supremacist group formation. Unfortunately, on Christmas Eve 1865, 6 former Confederate soldiers joined together in Pulaski, Tennessee, and formed the white supremacist group we all know today, the Ku Klux Klan. The group's original purpose was to provide a social outlet for its members, who were mostly former soldiers looking to reconnect and bond with each other after the end of the Civil War. However, the KKK quickly became known for its violent tactics and its opposition to the civil rights movement. The Klan's members, who were predominantly white Protestant men, wore white robes and hoods as part of their official uniform. They carried out numerous acts of violence and intimidation against African Americans and all sorts of other minority groups. This included lynchings, beatings, and all other forms of physical abuse. The Klan also targeted politicians and activists who supported civil rights for African Americans. They would often use threats and intimidation to silence them. Ever since, the Klan's numbers have been on the decrease, but regardless, racism is still prevalent, and this group will always be tied down to their discriminatory ideology. At a number 8 spot, we have the Italian Hall disaster. The Italian Hall disaster, also known as the 1913 mining disaster, was a tragic event that occurred in Calumet, Michigan on December 24, 1913. On that day, a group of copper miners and their families had gathered at the Italian Hall for a Christmas Eve party. At some point during the party, a false cry of fire was raised, causing a stampede of panicked people to try to exit the building. As people rushed to the front doors of the hall, they were met with a locked and blocked entrance, which just trapped all of them inside. As a result, 73 people, and many of them were children, were crushed or suffocated in this stampede. The Italian Hall disaster remains one of the most deadliest mining-related accidents in American history. In the aftermath of the disaster, a number of investigations were conducted to determine the cause of the stampede and who was responsible for the locked and blocked entrance. Despite these efforts, no one has ever been held accountable for this tragedy. At a number 7 spot, we have Cyclone Tracy. Cyclone Tracy was a devastating tropical cyclone that struck the city of Darwin in the Northern Territory of Australia. This occurred on Christmas Day 1974, and the storm caused widespread damage and loss of life, with winds reaching speeds up to 217 kilometers per hour, or 135 miles per hour for you Americans. It is considered one of the most destructive cyclones to have ever hit Australia. In the days leading up to the storm, residents of Darwin were warned of the approaching cyclone, but many of them did not take the warning seriously. As the storms hit, it caused widespread destruction, tearing roofs off buildings, toppling trees, power poles, and flooding streets. The winds were so strong they even lifted cars off the ground and sent them crashing into buildings, and you can see some on the 3rd floor of them. The storm claimed the lives of 71 people and injured over 500 more. Many residents were left homeless because of this, and the city was left without power, water, or telecommunications for days. In the aftermath of the storm, the government launched a massive reconstruction effort to rebuild the city and help those who have been affected by the cyclone. Thanks to lessons learned from the cyclone, new building codes were implemented to make structures more resistant to cyclones in the future. This has helped to reduce the damage caused by cyclones in Australia and has saved countless of lives since. At a number 6 spot, we have Air France hijacking. Air France Flight 8969 was a commercial flight that was hijacked by terrorists on December 24, 1994. The plane, which was en route from Algiers to Paris, was forced to land in Marseille, France, where the terrorists took over 300 passengers and crew members hostage. The situation lasted for 2 days, during which time French authorities worked to negotiate with the terrorists and try to free the hostages. On December 26, 1994, French special forces stormed the plane and were able to successfully free all of the hostages. In this, they were able to kill all the 4 terrorists in the process. The incident was a major event at the time, and it highlighted the threat of terrorism in Europe. Thankfully, all the passengers and crew members on board the plane were able to escape without any fatalities. It was a difficult and tense situation, but ultimately, the authorities were able to successfully resolve it. In the hump of our list, we have the Congo massacres. The Congo massacres of 2008 were a series of violent attacks that took place in the eastern regions of the Democratic Republic of Congo. These attacks were carried out by a number of different rebel groups, as well as the Congolese government forces, and resulted in the deaths of thousands of people. The violence began in the province of North Kivu, where a local rebel group known as the National Congress for the Defense of People, the CNDP, launched an offensive against the Congolese government. This quickly led to a broader conflict, with other rebel groups and government forces becoming involved. The crimes done here were horrific, with things I can't even mention. Eventually, the international community responded to the crisis with a combination of diplomatic efforts and military intervention. Then in November 2008, the United Nations Security Council authorized the deployment of peacekeeping force to the region, and ever since, the place has been a little bit more stable. At a number 4 spot, we have Charlie Chaplin's passing. Many don't know that Charlie Chaplin passed away on Christmas Day in 1977. For those who don't know this legend, he was a British actor and filmmaker who lived from 1889 to 1977. Chaplin is best known for his work in the silent film era, where he was a leading figure in the development of the slapstick genre. He was known for his iconic character, the Tramp, which was a lovable and mischievous vagabond who was known for his distinctive appearance. This included a bowler hat, a cane, and these oversized shoes. As well, Chaplin was a prolific filmmaker, with some of his titles being The Kid, City Lights, and Modern Times. As a result of his talents and hard work, he will be ever known as the most influential figures in the history of cinema. But don't forget that he passed away on Christmas Day. At a number 3 spot, we have the Indian Ocean tsunami. The Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004 was a catastrophic natural disaster that occurred on December 26, 2004. The tsunami, which was caused by a massive 9.1 magnitude earthquake off the coast of Sumatra, generated giant waves that reached heights up to 100 feet and traveled across the Indian Ocean at speeds up to 500 miles per hour. The tsunami devastated coastal areas in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and even Thailand, and also caused damage as far away as the east coast of Africa. The earthquake and resulting tsunami claimed the lives of more than 230,000 people, making it one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. In the hardest hit areas, entire towns and villages were completely destroyed, with the tsunami sweeping away buildings, cars, and people in its path. In addition to the human toll, the disaster also caused a significant economic loss, with estimates ranging from $10 billion to $30 billion USD in damages. This event highlighted the destructive power of natural disasters and the importance of being prepared to respond to one. At a number 2 spot, we have the Lawson family murders. The Lawson family murders were a shocking and tragic event that occurred on Christmas Day, 1929, in rural North Carolina. The victims were 7 members of the Lawson family: Charles Lawson, his wife, 3 of their children, and Charlie's parents. The perpetrators of the crime have never been identified, and the case remains one of the most infamous unsolved murder mysteries in American history. On the evening of December 25, the Lawson family was found murdered in their home, and they had been shot multiple times, and their bodies were discovered by a neighbor who had gone to check on them after they failed to attend a Christmas gathering. The killer or killers had also set fire to the house in an attempt to destroy all evidence, but the fire was quickly extinguished and the bodies were recovered. The crime sent shockwaves to the community and the nation as a whole. The brutal nature of the killings and the fact that they occurred on Christmas Day made the crime even more disturbing. Despite an extensive investigation and a large reward offered for information leading to the arrest, the case remains unsolved to this day. At a number 1 spot, we have the Taeyongak Hotel fire. For the famous Taeyongak Hotel, things were pretty normal on Christmas Day 1971. Everyone appeared to be having a good time while others were settling in for the evening. Then all of a sudden, an unexpected disaster occurred. First, a gas explosion happened at the hotel, then a fire followed after that. The hotel was swiftly consumed by the flames, in which is referred as the worst hotel fire in history. It was said that the entire area was illuminated in the night, and 166 people had perished by the time the fire was finally extinguished. 8 people, including the hotel's owner, were detained, and the majority of the victims perished from smoke inhalation. Eventually, the building was remodeled after the fire, and unfortunately, in February 27, 2010, it had another fire. At a number 10 spot, we have real decapitation. On New Year's Eve in Oldsmar, Florida, a shocking and gruesome crime was reported to the police. Mario Gomez called 911 to report that his brother, Christian Gomez, had just decapitated their mother with an axe. When responding deputies arrived at the scene, they found the body of 48-year-old Maria Suarez Casagni outside the Tampa area home, with her head in a nearby garbage can. You could only imagine what this would have looked like for the people who discovered it. But the story gets even more disturbing. Later, Christian Gomez was found on a bike about a mile from the home and taken into custody. And according to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, he admitted to the murder and has been charged with first-degree murder. The motive behind the crime was reportedly the younger Gomez's frustration with his mother's nagging over moving boxes into the attic over the previous 2 days. It's a shocking and unimaginable reason for such a violent and tragic act to take place. This incident serves as a reminder of the potential for violence and tragedy to occur at any time, even on a festive holiday like New Year's Eve. At a number 9 spot, we have the woman in red at Drake Hotel. On New Year's Eve in 1920, the Drake Hotel in Chicago was the place to be for the wealthy and the famous. As the newly built hotel opened its doors to host a celebration to remember, attendees from all over the world flocked to the event, excited to see the luxurious building and ring in the new year. But little did they know, one of the guests would be a part of history that night, a haunting history that has lasted over a century. According to the legend, a man and his fiancée were at the party. The fiancée, dressed in a vibrant red gown, caught her husband being disloyal and was torn apart by the betrayal. In a fit of rage and sadness, she threw herself from the 10th floor window, ending her life. At the time, it was thought that the tragic incident was the end of the poor woman's story. However, multiple sightings of an apparition in a red dress have been reported at the hotel since this incident. Some say that she is intent on replaying her final night, as she is seen typically wandering the 10th floor where she took her own life. She's also seen spotted roaming the hallways, seemingly unaware that she passed away over a century ago. It seems that sometimes a truly heartbroken just can't let go. And at the Drake Hotel, the ghost of the woman in the red dress serves as a haunting reminder of the power of love, loss, and a heartbreak. And spot, we have Rare Exports. Rare Exports is a 2010 Finnish horror film that tells the story of a group of people living near a remote mountain in Finland. As they begin to uncover the secrets of the mountain, they come to realize that it is a burial ground of the real Santa Claus. Yeah, this Santa Claus has been apparently kept frozen for centuries. As they try to unravel the mystery of the mountain, they discover that Santa Claus is not the jolly old man they thought he was, but rather a fearsome and malevolent being who has been unleashed upon the world. The movie is a blend of dark humor and horror and has been described as creepy and suspenseful by some viewers. Some of the scariest moments in the film include the discovery of the ancient frozen Santa Claus. It is not as jolly and plump as the legend is, but instead a terrifying creature with sharp teeth and long white hair. Other terrifying scenes in this movie include the moments when the group of boys would be chased and hunted by the Santa Claus. Just seeing the Santa move at inhumane speeds and just disappear into the shadows is enough to make you think of Christmas a bit more differently. At a number 9 spot, we have A Black Christmas. Black Christmas is a 1974 horror film that was directed by Bob Clark and written by Roy Moore. The film centers around a group of sorority sisters who are living in a house together over the Christmas break. As the holiday season approaches, the girls begin to receive threatening phone calls from an unknown caller who seems to know all about their lives. The caller becomes increasingly violent and begins to stalk the girls, leading to a series of gruesome murders. The film is considered to be one of the earliest examples of the slasher film genre. It's also notable for its use of the point of view shot to create suspense. The film was a commercial success, and it has since gained a cult following among fans of the horror genre. This film eventually led the way to other slashers like Friday the 13th and Halloween, so all thanks to that. There are a good amount of casualties in this movie, so just be prepared for the worst if you decide to turn this one on. At the number 8 spot, we have Christmas Evil. Christmas Evil is a 1980 horror film written and directed by Lewis Jackson. The film follows the story of Harry Stadling, a toy factory worker who becomes obsessed with the idea of Santa Claus. After being traumatized by a Santa impersonator as a child, Harry becomes fixated on the idea of becoming the perfect Santa, and he begins to stalk and terrorize those he deems to be naughty, like Santa. Basically, he thinks he is Santa Claus himself. Eventually, his obsession leads to him going on a killing spree on Christmas Eve that is one of the bloodiest in cinematic history. This really gives other slasher films a run for their money. Throughout the film, the viewer is given insight into Harry's troubled mind and the psychological toll that his obsession takes on him and those around him. The film is known for his dark humor and his exploration of the impact of trauma on the human psyche. Despite its low-budget production and mixed reception from critics, the film has developed a cult following as mentioned, and it is still one of the greatest Christmas horror movies of all time. Number 7, Silent Night, Deadly Night. Silent Night, Deadly Night is a 1984 holiday-themed horror film about a young boy named Billy who witnesses his parents being murdered by a man dressed as Santa Claus. This traumatic experience causes Billy to develop a fear of Santa and all things associated with Christmas. This means reindeer, Christmas trees, presents, and gingerbread houses. Yeah, he was scared of all of it. Even when he got older, his fear of Santa Claus remains, and he is unable to enjoy the holiday season like other people. So one day, his family is threatened by a group of burglars, and Billy just snaps and goes on a killing spree dressed as none other than Santa Claus. I do warn you, this movie is extremely gory, and there's even a scene where someone gets impaled with a deer antler. And I know a lot of you guys are gonna tune in just because I said that. As well, seeing Santa as a vicious murderer instead of a joyful giver is definitely something people don't expect around these festive times. Number 6, Night of the Comet. Night of the Comet is a campy, hilarious, and completely delightful romp through a post-apocalyptic world filled with zombies, killer robots, and really bad hairstyles. The 1984 film follows two teenage sisters, Reggie and Samantha, who are the only survivors of a catastrophic comet that wipes out most of humanity. As they struggle to survive in a world full of mindless zombies and dangerous creatures, they also have to deal with the perils of being a teenager in the 80s, which obviously includes stuff like the bad hair, the awkward dates, and trying to find the perfect pair of jeans. The comic arrived 11 days before Christmas, so much of this movie deals with the festive holiday. However, it isn't the premise. Overall, a one-of-a-kind movie with the most unique blend of science fiction, horror, and comedy all in one. Right in the hump of our list, we have The Lodge. The Lodge is a spine-tingling psychological horror film that will have you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. This 2009 psychological horror film, directed by Severin Fiala and Veronica Franz, takes place during Christmas time, and that's basically the only connection to Christmas. Sorry. The story follows a young woman named Grace who becomes a caretaker of a remote lodge with her soon-to-be stepchildren. They're all struggling to cope with the recent passing of their mother, and as they begin to unravel, they are haunted by mysterious and terrifying events that suggest the presence of a malevolent force. The tension builds and the twist keeps coming as the family is forced to confront their deepest fears and darkest secrets here. With its chilling atmosphere, talented casting, and shocking ending, The Lodge is a must-see for fans of horror and suspense, events with a little bit of touch of the Christmas times. Number 4, The Nightmare Before Christmas. This one is less terrifying and more of a classic among Christmas and horror movie enthusiasts. The Nightmare Before Christmas is a stop-motion animated film directed by Henry Selick and produced by Tim Burton. The film follows Jack Skellington as he discovers and becomes fascinated by Christmastown. Despite the reluctance of the other Halloween Town residents, Jack sets out to kidnap Santa Claus and take over the Christmas holiday. The film combines elements of fantasy, horror, and musical genres and has become a classic. It was released in 1993 and continues to be a popular Halloween and Christmas movie, and although it is not super horrific, the movie does have its moments. The film has a dark and grim aesthetic that may be unsettling for those first-time viewers, but once you dive into the story, I promise you guys won't be able to escape it. Number 3, Polar Express. I know what you're thinking, Polar Express isn't scary at all. And it wasn't meant to be scary, so how's it on this list? First of all, Tom Hanks voices 6 characters. Pretty scary. Okay, jokes aside, this movie touches upon the uncanny valley where the animations make the characters in the movie seem a bit too real, but something seems off. Every time I looked into these lifeless ICGIs, I only questioned if there was anything else to these animations. As well, there's stuff like the ghost on the roof, the weird unfriendly conductor, and the constant chance of peril. The fact that you're never sure if the train is good or bad, this movie makes you question every good thing that happens. And trust me, this movie was meant to be good in every single way. One of the creepiest moments in this film had to be the scene with the puppets. This scene just felt weird and unnecessary, but maybe that's only me. Regardless, give this movie a try if you want to watch something that's supposed to be a good, happy movie, but instead has a lot of darker undertones to it. Number 2, Gremlins. This movie isn't the most terrifying, but another Christmas horror film classic. And we have Gremlins. Gremlins is a classic 1984 American horror comedy film directed by Joe Dante. The film tells the story of a young man named Billy who receives a strange and mysterious creature called a mogwai as a Christmas present. The mogwai, which he names Gizmo, is a lovable and cute creature, but it comes with a set of strict rules that must be followed. These include that it must never be exposed to bright light or water or be fed after midnight. However, rules are meant to be broken, and this is exactly what happens. The film is well known for its dark humor and its use of special effects to bring the creatures to life. It was a commercial success and spawned a franchise of sequels, including Gremlins 2, The New Batch, released in 1990. If you're a fan of horror comedies or just want to see something unique and entertaining, Gremlins is definitely worth checking out. At a number 1 spot, we have Krampus. Krampus is a 2015 horror comedy film that is based on the mythical creature of the same name. The film follows a young boy named Max who loses his Christmas spirit and inadvertently summons Krampus, a demonic creature who punishes those who have lost the true meaning of Christmas, especially to warn those who have been a bit too naughty around these times. As Krampus and his minions terrorizes Max's family and his friends, they must fight to survive and save Christmas from being completely destroyed. Now, outside of the movie, Krampus is known to be this mythical creature from European folklore, who is said to punish children who have been naughty. In some depictions, Krampus is portrayed as a frightening figure with horns, a long tongue, and sharp teeth. He may also carry chains or a bundle of birch branches to whip misbehaving children, so you can imagine how terrifying this being is in the movie. Also directed by Michael Dougherty, you can't go wrong watching this Christmas classic. Well, these are the top 10 Christmas horror movies that will keep you up. What do you guys think about this list? Leave a comment down below, and I hope you guys have a good Christmas season, because I will.